succeed the way a lot of people thought it would. There was a lot of response to the fact that they undercollected considerably. We also felt the same way because in Texas, the first year, Dell collected 12 million of the 15 million pounds that were collected that year. And we sort of looked around and said, well, are we the only ones doing this? We had a network of goodwill partners at that time. So we created another model, the one that we'll talk about further. I'd be glad to discuss it during questioning, but a model that takes the elements of a more aggressive target model requiring collection mandates and the original industry model, which just required the industry to set up programs and didn't have any kind of specific mandates. This would set what we consider to be a reasonable target of 4 pounds per capita for TVs and computers, allocated among the companies by market share. It requires an underachievement fee, a penalty for failure to meet your target. It allows you to over-collect, to keep collections going through the year once you meet your target, and use those over-collections to either sell to other companies or bank for use in a future year. This legislation it's a model that we've developed. It's gotten mixed reviews, I will admit. Some of the industry don't like the fact that it has mandates. Some of the environmentalists we talk to think it doesn't go far enough. But we think that if everybody's a little bit unhappy, then maybe we have something here. The bill is, interesting enough, the bill is moving in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has no recycling law. They're one of the last major states that doesn't have one. And it's been reported out of Senate committee. So we are optimistic that Massachusetts may be the first state to adopt this model, which is this sort of hybrid model that we believe is a way to encourage companies to set up programs, actually have a collection infrastructure, and to meet a preset goal. That goal can go up or down based upon a formula that is in the bill, so it's not static. It'll reflect the market as time goes on. It may go down as market weights drop and products get lighter. It may go up as people become more aware and more products are collected. So that's just a little taste of what this model does. And I find myself in agreement with much of that has been said so far in this panel. Not surprisingly, I mean, we're a very, very strong environmental company, but we have a strict prohibition on exporting waste of any of our recycling partners, our recyclers. Must meet our standards, and our standards include a strict export prohibition. We have a very aggressive design program to do exactly what many have been talking about here, and that's to create a more recyclable friendly product at the end of life, one that lasts longer, more environmentally friendly, and safer products. So we're constantly updating and changing the products we use, the materials we use inside our products, as new alternatives become available. I think we're the first company to prohibit Deca BDE products in our materials in our products some 10 years ago, and we've been pretty aggressive in moving ahead on that score as well. So I will leave it at that. I should mention that we've been active in many states. 25 states now have laws. California was the first with the advanced recycling fee. We did not support the advanced recycling fee. We felt that the customers should not have that imposed on them. We felt that the industry should be responsible for the program and could do it more effectively. So we've taken that position and carried it to other states, and there are now 24 other states that have programs. About 10 of them have a pure industry model, and they're being looked at to make them better. And another 15 states have a mix of market share and return share models, that many of which are very government oriented or government mandated, and some are very costly to run. So we're looking at something that's sort of in the middle of those two extremes to try to get a balance and to manage the volumes that are going to be coming as we ramp this up. So I'll be looking forward to a discussion.
Great, thanks, Frank. I think a number of the panelists have brought up that there's differences between the states. And so for edification, I think it might be appropriate to kind of talk about what's the difference between how things run here in California and what we see of the best and the worst of other states. I guess maybe the worst is nothing, which we've got in a bunch of states. But of the states that have some sort of e-waste program. So I don't know, Heidi or Barbara, you want to jump in, and then somebody else we'll get Fran and others to.
Yeah, maybe I'll do like the macro view and then
Okay.
maybe talk more specifically about California. So of the 25 states that were mentioned, one of those isn't really a statewide mandated program. So I think there's 24 states that have programs that have laws that have resulted in statewide electronics recycling programs. The California model was the first one, the advanced recycling fee. I know you don't like that term, but that's sort of what we're too used to it. And everyone else has passed some version of producer responsibility. And so with the fundamental concept that in some way the manufacturers need to pay for the collection and recycling of their old products. And there's different flavors of that. And frankly, it's interesting because when California first went, actually that law was introduced as a producer take back, and it got switched into a fee bill in the final hours. But when states started doing this was a crazy idea, right? Like, this was a crazy idea. What do you mean I have to take back this thing I already sold to you? I'm done with it. What are you talking about? And it was borrowed from Europe, but it was a pretty, talk about corporate responsibility. It's pretty amazing that I think that it's moved so quickly. And now it's a much more commonplace thing, but really the states had no playbook. And so the states were trying some different things. And it's been an incredibly interesting, I think, policy incubator for how do you legislate this really complex thing, which, these were 30 and 50-page bills. This is not a simple thing to work through any, as I know Fran knows probably more than all of us, any state house. So they've, as one state starts, the other thing that's been amazing to me is how much the states work together and look at what each other is doing and share information and really try to figure this out. And so there's, the first states that went had to pick a certain model and just try it, and the other states took a while for data to start coming in. So now states have the benefit of information from the first states that went. So I would say there's really like 3 or 4 categories of how you can divide up all these laws. Some are laws that say the manufacturer has to meet a collection goal. So there's bills, I would say there's strong bills and weak bills. The ones that the manufacturers actually have to meet a goal, you have to take back, this much of what you sell, or some number that's figured out in advance. Then there are some states that don't give an actual goal, but they say how convenient it needs to be. Washington and Oregon have gone this way to say, okay, we're not going to give you a goal, but it has to be this convenient. You each have to have a collection site in every county and every city over 10,000 people, or something like that. Those are kind of the 2 models that include what we call drivers, and we're seeing the highest results from those states that have some kind of driver, some kind of a number that they can enforce for what the manufacturer has to do, either how much to collect or how convenient to make it. Then there's other states that have different versions of what manufacturers have to pay, but they don't have their drivers in there, so they don't have the goals that they have to meet. And what we have learned, Fran, the Texas experience was, pretty eye-opening for some people. When Texas passed a bill that basically said you have to have a take-back program, but we're not going to tell you how to do it or how much you have to do. It was sort of the good faith that the manufacturers, and I have to say, Dell, bless your hearts, believed they would actually do it, and they didn't. Dell was the only one that took it seriously, and what he didn't say is they took the first year out of 15 million, they collected 12 million, HP collected 40,000 pounds compared to 12 million. Some had big fat zeros. So it's not, what we've learned, there's now enough states that have that bill and that model that we can see the results and see how much comes back and who's doing it. And really there's only a few companies that are taking this seriously. Dell is certainly at the head of the line by leaps and bounds, how much they take back. Samsung to some extent, and Best Buy in terms of volumes. So it's still something that's being figured out on the state levels. And then I don't know if you want to talk specifically about the ARF and then maybe compare how those are working.
So I don't know if Heidi or Andre,
I can give an overview of just sort of how our program works.
Okay.
So there are several state agencies involved. So that is potentially something that people might think is a drawback of the type of system we have here. We have the California Board of Equalization, and they are responsible for collecting the fee, and the fee is due on, there are currently 9 categories of video display devices that are covered in California. So the Board of Equalization collects the fees, and there are fee returns submitted by just every retailer in the state who sells a covered device. So there's this, a not insignificant sort of bureaucracy that comes with that. That money that's collected, and it's collected based on the size of the screen, because it's strictly for video display devices, goes to a fund. And that fund, the Electronic Waste Recovery and Recycling Account, the payments are made from that to what we call approved recyclers. And our sister agency, the CalRecycle, approves collectors and recyclers in the payment program for payment. So these are typically not connected or affiliated with the manufacturer. There are a lot of businesses, smaller businesses, Goodwills participate, for example. And these companies or entities, sometimes they're also public agencies, are required to comply and sort of demonstrate that they're complying with hazardous waste laws that apply to them. So for the recyclers, that means that inspectors from the department I work for, Toxic Substances Control, goes out once a year and looks at what they're doing, evaluates them. If there's nothing egregious going on that violates the rules significantly, we communicate with CalRecycle that this recycler is in conformance with our rules and eligible for payment. So then they are required to do a certain level of processing, dismantling, what the term is cancellation. They have to cancel the device so that it basically can't be claimed again, and submit documentation that they've done that. And then finally, for the bulk of the devices that are in our program currently are cathode ray tube devices, they have to ship the glass to an end-use destination, what's called an end-use destination, that's authorized to further treat the glass. So the idea is that it's moving down the road to being a commodity and being recycled, reclaimed into another product. Typically it's another cathode ray tube. So that's kind of just a sketch of sort of how the material flows. It's collected, the collector passes it to the recycler does some reclamation and then ships the commodities to somewhere, typically out of the state or out of the country, for further processing, and payment is made based on very sort of close scrutiny of payment claims. So there's a lot of documentation that goes along with the payment program. As I mentioned, we've had about 1.3 billion with a B pounds of material go through the program since its inception over 7 years. We have about just under 600 approved collectors and about 55 approved recyclers in the state. So that's the kind of the infrastructure. So based on just sort of mass, we really have had a lot of success at diverting this material from the trash. So combined with the payment, the incentive that provides for businesses to do the recycling, along with the ban and prohibition on landfill, has led us to some fairly significant numbers as far as diversion from landfills.
Yeah, Heidi.
So reading a little bit further into what Andre said, the difference between a producer responsibility system and an advanced disposal fee or recycling fee, or not advanced as Jeff would say, but is really the government designs, operates the system, and manages the money. That's very different than having the producer design, operate the system, and manage the money, and then having government oversight. So government can have a very powerful role and be a good check and balance, but not necessarily be in the doing. And that's really the fundamental basic difference between the government-run program and the producer responsibility program, which we have here in California. Our current program has about 80 people in state government, approximately 70 to 80, between 55 at the Board of Equalization, just to collect the fee, because it's a visible fee, collected at retail, 28,500 retailers, pulled into one fund in state government, and then the CalRecycle and the Department of Toxic Substances Control staff, that's about another, 10 to 20 people depending on the day. So we've got 80 people in state government managing a part of the waste stream that is literally, it's very, very small. If we were to design state government around this model, we would fill all of downtown Sacramento with bodies. We just, this is a big government model. And if we try to get all electronics like we have in other countries, where it's everything with a current or everything with a cord, with this model, we would have to grow government significantly. And quite frankly, that's not very politically palatable right now. So that I just wanted to make sure that some of the basic differences, and we would also prefer in producer responsibility models that be internalized costs. So it's not a necessarily visible fee. A producer could put, X 25 cents of the cost goes to recycling and put that on the label, but to actually have the retailer have it itemized on a receipt. If we do every product this way, your receipts are going to get really long, and in some countries they were, which is part of the reason they started going with internalized costs. When you internalize the cost as well, it really just sends a clear market signal to us and the public. We just know that we have a recycling program, but we as the consumer made the choice to buy that product. We are going to pay this price for the product. We chose that product, and then we will pay the full life cycle. We are not going to have people buying big, TVs that then their neighbor will have to pay part of the price when they have a smaller TV. So we like internalization of costs. It's a much easier system. The retailers do not like advanced disposal fees or any kind of separate fee on the receipt at all, because then they have to keep track of all of this, and it creates a big accounting system. So
yeah, but I think going back to what Alistair said, kind of the link to green chemistry too, in driving change. Maybe Fran, you could address: does the California system drive that change, or does it, because it's fee based up front and they'll take anything at the end, leave it out?
Yeah, it would seem to me that there is no incentive by the manufacturers to drive design changes if they have no responsibility for the end of life. In other words, their responsibility literally ends at the time of purchase, because once the consumer pays that $6, $8, $10, whatever it is, neither the company nor the consumer really has any further responsibility. The government takes over, and the government runs the program. I would say that under a producer responsibility model, there is a tremendous incentive, and we live by this, to design the products to be more easily recycled, because that lowers the cost per unit to accomplish that at the end of life. So we're looking at the end of the product, average 7 years, and how we go about doing that, and how do we make that cost effective? Because that gets, let's face it, the customer does pay for recycling. There's no question about it. What I would say, though, is that what we build into the price, we internalize that cost, is a fraction of what the advanced recycling fee is in California. And that's by both the design of the product, the cost effectiveness of the system with our Goodwill and Staples partners, and the whole process of doing that, the types of recyclers, the market-driven contracts that we have with recyclers. We negotiate price per pound with them. So it is market-driven. There's no market driving what the state of California pays recyclers. So it's whatever the recyclers say that they have for costs, they receive it, and it can vary, and it is pretty high. I know I've seen some estimates of the cost per pound, and we do it for a fraction of that.
Okay.
So.
Can I add one?
Let Andre, and then Dustin. I
had a couple of things that I was wanting to jump in, but on that point, I didn't mention that our Electronic Waste Recycling Act also incorporated, sort of by reference, the European Union's ROS Directive, 2002/95/EC.
Yeah.
But only for the metals. So there are some brominated flame retardants that are restricted in the EU in electrical and electronic equipment sold in that market, and for the covered electronic devices, only the 4 metals are restricted. But I just wanted to mention that. As far as the label, I totally take Heidi's point about long receipts and things. There was one advantage I can think of with having something on the receipt, which is lets people know, if they didn't, that there's something special about this electronic device I'm buying, that it's not to be trashed. There's some educational element, I think, of I'm paying something, there's something written on here. I think that might be one value that it had, and there's probably other ways of doing that. But that was my thought.
So Dustin, thinking about electronics and then photovoltaics, there's a lot of synergies between. In fact, in the slide that you showed, you look at SIGs, you look at the cadmium telluride. Those don't sound very pleasant to
Right.
have to, kind
Most of
of.
the SIGs has cadmium in it too. So.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to point out one, I think, important distinction between federal and state policy, and that is they write their definitions of hazardous waste differently. So there are a ton of solar panels that fail the California test, but they pass the federal test. So if you ask a solar manufacturer, are your modules toxic waste or hazardous waste at the end of life? They'll say
The answer
yes,
is it depends.
well, they usually pick the one that's easiest for them to,
Yeah.
the EPA one. So that's an important, I think, distinction, because if we're talking about drivers
Right.
for green chemistry, and if everybody just sticks with the EPA's kind of less ground up test that they do when they leach out the chemicals,
Yeah.
whereas the California one, they grind it up to smaller sized particles, then you're not going to have the drivers, or you'll have different drivers
You'll
in
have
different
different
places. So I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind. We define things differently in different places, and that has a lot of impact.
So should photovoltaics, and maybe, I'll ask the audience too, should they be included as electronics?
Why aren't they now?
Yeah.
It's the same materials.
So we get a yes here.
Yeah, I mean, why aren't DVD players and like all the 25
Copiers.
things you have in your home under all of these laws? I mean, the scope of products is a very hot topic in the states too. And again, I think it reflects that states wanted to start with something small, but it's becoming painfully obvious that they should include everything. So the collectors can only get reimbursed and the recyclers for basically displays in California, but everybody wants to get rid of their crappy printer, right? The one that came for free and it doesn't work and it's a big
See a lot of
hunk
heads nodding.
plastic, right? So in some cases, the collectors take those for free and they make the recycler take them off their hands in order to also get their CRTs for which they can get reimbursed. So they're kind of a little bit of extortion.
Okay, but
going
that's
on.
California, and that's one model. But maybe Fran,
Yeah,
because there's lots of other states that do take those printers that.
Right,
Starting
right.
to.
And I think there is always a debate about product scope and how many products should be included. I would say that California has got clearly the most limited group of products of any state law. Barbara, I
Right,
think you
yes.
probably agree, with just screens over 4 inches, and that's really very limiting. No desktops, no printers, no other peripherals. So yes, the product scope is critical, and I think I don't necessarily believe that it should be everything with an electric cord, but we have a standard policy. We'll take back anything with a Dell logo on it.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we were suggesting in this model that I described earlier that if you have peripherals associated with the covered product being the desktop, for example, that all peripherals you can return as well, and they'll be counted as part of the collection volume. So it's an encouragement for the manufacturers to collect stuff that isn't technically defined if it's peripheral to the product. So we get, for TVs, for example, DVD players, old VCRs are peripheral to the TV, so they would be counted as part of the weight. For computers, well, printers are already included, but it's keyboard, mice,
Yeah.
external hard drives, a variety of other things that that are attached to the computer. So it encourages the manufacturers to collect this stuff and include it in their weight. So it sort of broadens the product scope almost de facto, just by the fact that you can do that and get credit for it.
Interesting. So I've got a bunch more questions here, but I wanted to make sure that we leave time for the audience to ask questions. So if you have a question, I think we have some folks with mics that can. Yes. So we've got. Is that we have a mic back there, and I think we have a mic down here. We've got a question there in the back row, and over here in the white sweater person.
Hi there. So I'm wondering about the reimbursement for the CRTs. Does that actually does it fully cover the cost it takes to recycle them responsibly?
So the fee, or the reimbursement rate is at 39 cents a pound currently, which covers both collection and recycling. CalRecycle sets that rate periodically based on net cost reports. So people in the system have to submit a net cost report that covers all their various costs, overhead, recycling costs, disposition of things, and that is the basis, the average net cost for that fee. So on average, it should cover it.
And I guess part B would be, is there anywhere in North America that recycles those?
There are no
Thumbs up
CRT
way.
manufacturers in North America or in this hemisphere.
In this
Is there
hemisphere?
any
Wait.
CRT manufacturing in the world right now?
No, not
Does
manufacturing.
anybody buy those
In
anymore?
India, there's
Recycling,
there's
not
at least one or
manufacturing.
two. And
You're talking about
understanding-
recycling?
I'm talking about recycling, not manufacturing.
Processing the leaded glass?
Exactly. Thank you, Fran.
We have a lead smelter in Missouri. There are some in Canada that can use the glass and reclaim the lead.
But it's a problem, there's
Thank you.
not a lot of good options for CRT glass. So if there's ever a lesson to be learned about thinking about end of life when you design a product, it's CRT glass, because the way you do recycle it is in remanufacturing. Well, there's some of that happening elsewhere, but we don't buy CRTs anymore. Most of the developed countries don't. So it's a huge problem. There's some smelters, the one in Missouri has almost no capacity. There's some in Canada. So some of it goes to Mexico and India, but recyclers, you'll probably hear more about this in the next panel that has recyclers on it. That is a huge problem and an incredible lesson for design.
Tony, I just want to respond to the young lady's first question with regard to does it cover the cost? We sell, well, we don't sell anymore, but we used to sell CRT monitors, we're strictly flat screen, but we would take back, CRT monitors all the time, as well as fairly good sized desktop towers, everything. And we cover our costs. I mean, we have a program that's set up and we have contracts with the recyclers that process these in a responsible way. All of our recyclers are either R2 or E-Stewards certified. And we can do it, and we do it for, I'm going to just estimate, between a quarter and a third of the cost of that's paid to the recyclers in California.
So we pay them, it's 23 cents goes to the recycler, right? So, per pound.
Okay, so we're still maybe half of that, third to a half of that.
No, there's no cost. To get rid of the glass, you couldn't do it. It'd be impossible. So I don't know where the glass goes. Impossible.
So we get the recyclers up, so we get, all right. So we get some,
That's what we're worried about. That's what we're worried about.
yeah. So we've got the recyclers in the next panel, so we'll get into that. But this is, yeah, okay. So there was another question, I think, in the back there. Yeah.
All right. So the primary way to drive design changes among manufacturers is to create an individual collection system as opposed to a collective system where the producer collects the products directly so they know what kind of design changes they need. Are there currently any states right now or policies in place that has that type of compliance mechanism?
So what he's talking about is collective responsibility versus individual responsibility. If I'm Dell, do I get Dell stuff back? Therefore, if I've changed my design, I want my stuff back. And that's not currently really how most of the state programs are working. It's much more collective. And I think we have to look at the evolution here with a long view. We're still in pushback mode, really. There's still a lot of resistance from the manufacturers to having to do this at all. And so we have to get past where they, and obviously some companies like Dell have, but some companies will do anything to make this go away. And so we have to get past that, and then I think fine-tune the model. I think harmonize a lot of the state laws, which I think a lot of that could be done as we're learning about the differences and the pros and cons. And then I think as we see, I think Apple's going to be interesting to watch, because Apple was the first one that switched to all metal external casings in their laptops, right? They got away from the plastics, and that's all metal stuff, some aluminum alloy. And so will we see Apple actually do more, which they do not do now, to get their own stuff back as a result of that kind of material change, because they're trying to reap the benefit of that. I think the volumes are way too low right now to see any of that. And even design change in a significant way, we're still in talk to the hand mode. So we're not going to see that for a while. But I think we will eventually. And then I think there'll be a lot of fine tuning and hopefully figure out better ways for the companies to actually get back their own stuff.
So one of the things that keeps coming up, that we keep talking about states and the differences between states, and Massachusetts just introducing a law that has nothing right now, which that surprises me. I would have thought that most of the Northeast would be. Why don't we just have federal legislation that covers all of this stuff, that covers PV, that, I haven't heard anybody talk about federal legislation on this.
Well, we actively supported federal legislation some years ago. In fact, the original model that we developed with other companies was for a federal bill, but we quickly became, just believed that nothing was going to happen at the federal level. And I don't know exactly why, other than the fact that everybody would agree that Congress is pretty much dysfunctional, but, but other than that, there's been a real difficult time getting a consensus on a national program. I think the industry would really welcome that because of the patchwork that's developed.
Yeah.
It may be too late for that because you already got in place half the states with laws, so it's going to be hard to harmonize those. But I think that we would welcome it because the economies of scale that we could develop in a national collection program. And there is talk about doing something exactly like that. CEA, the Consumer Electronics Association, has been talking about a national collection system which companies would all join. We would support that kind of an effort, but at the same time, we believe that you can't say no new state laws, we're going to put together a voluntary industry program, or we're going to wait for the feds to act. We believe that, we need to impact that state decision making, and we've tried to do it. We've been successful in some states and not so successful in others. So I think there is definitely a movement in that direction.
Can I say something about Nancy?
Yeah, you could say something.
The National Electronics Product Stewardship
Initiative, right?
Yeah, it was an industry. There was a whole huge debate, 10 years ago, Barbara? 8 years ago? To have a nationally harmonized program, and everybody got together and we're trying to kumbaya. Didn't work. Guess who walked away? It was the TV manufacturers. So, the interesting thing, when I went to Europe and spoke to the WE Forum in the end of 2010, they asked me to speak about harmonization in the United States, and I said, please talk to your colleagues in your companies in the U.S. side of the House and convince them to lead on this issue, because if they don't, the patchwork quilt we are building in the United States for electronics rules will make your heads spin and your costs skyrocket. Please, because these same companies that operate here operate all over the world under various producer responsibility models. They know how to do it.
Sure.
But in the United States, even internally, they were telling me in Europe, they have they said that the U.S. side of the House wants hands off. They don't want to be told what to do by anybody else. So, interesting.
So I used to think, if I can just speak to that quickly, I used to think that we would work on getting a few states, get laws passed in a few states, and then let's do it on a national level. I used to think that was the right way to proceed. I think a lot of us did when the whole NEPSI thing fell apart. Well, okay, they won't agree, and mostly because of the TV guys, so we'll just start working in the states and then bring it back. I do not believe that now. I think that there's no way we will pass a strong take-back bill. Forget this Congress, even just in the last 5 years of Congress, it's not going to happen. They will pass a weak law. They will not pass a strong law. So if we want laws that actually produce some numbers, it's all in the states. And think about it. There has been no strong environmental legislation passed in this country since when? Before half of you were born, right? Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. It's not what they do. The corporate money is so focused in D.C., and it's gotten worse, it's never going to happen. So our challenge, as anybody that's going to work in policy in this, is to figure out how do we harmonize the states so that it's not the kind of financial, kind of stupid that it's this way, that here in this state and that way in another state. Harmonize it and take away some of those costs, but still get the states in charge, because it's just not going to happen federally.
Okay, so if it's not going to happen at a federal level, one of the things that I'm seeing in other industry sectors, and not so much in electronics, but maybe we can talk about this, is what I call the Walmart effect, where Walmart comes in and says, I like this or I don't like that, and all of a sudden their supply chain starts lining up.
Yep.
And so you're seeing changes taking place as a result of big retailers like that coming in and saying, I don't care if there isn't any legislation, I want to see this happen, and people start changing. If you take, I think Best Buy is the #1 electronics retailer, followed by Walmart, followed by Staples and a bunch of others that come in behind there. Have we seen any initiatives by the retailers to start kind of getting out in front of this and enforcing?
Only Best Buy. Walmart doesn't do anything. It's kind of shocking. And there's actually some of our affiliates are pressuring them to do it, but only Best Buy has a national take-back
Okay.
system.
What
We'd
about
love,
Staples?
we'd love to see Walmart do it, but they don't.
Staples, I know they have a partnership with us, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
if they have any other corporate partnerships. But let me just comment on that a few years ago, not that many years ago, the retailers dug their heels in and said, we are not going to get involved with this at all. We don't like the advanced recycling fee because we have to collect it.
Right.
We don't want to be responsible. We don't want a dumpster in every parking lot of a Best Buy. We're just simply not going to do this. And they fought tooth and nail any kind of recycling bill, any kind, unless they were totally statutorily exempted from any responsibility. That's changing.
Yeah.
That is changing. And I think Barbara and Heidi will verify that there is some level of interest, and it's not totally altruistic, because I think some of these, for example, take like our partnership with Staples. If somebody brings in an old Dell product, they've got walk-in traffic. They got somebody's there. So when they're there, they can say, well, since you're bringing back an old one, you want to look at some new ones? We've got a great array here. So they're beginning to get the idea. It's good for their brand. It's good for their image, being green.